Awesome. Cool. Welcome to our third producer Q&A. So our guest today is Darcy Dennett. Darcy is an award-winning filmmaker and producer based in New York. Her career spans over 2 decades. She has produced films and TV series for CNN and National Geographic. Her projects include This Is Life with Lisa Ling, Oprah Winfrey's landmark international series Believe, and the highly successful Dogtown, which follows trainers, vets, and caregivers at a Utah animal sanctuary that as they rescue and rehabilitate dogs that would otherwise be euthanized. And my co-host today is our founder, Klaus Vadelt. Before Film Hub, Klaus has written music to over 80 films. To name just a few, Pirates of the Caribbean, the Beijing Olympics, The Time Machine, Equilibrium, and The Pledge. And I also need to point out, Klaus is a fairly new dog owner. His new family member is Bean, and he's a rescue from the streets of Tijuana and 20% American pit bull. So Klaus is doing his parts. So which leads us to our topic today, The Champions, a documentary Darcy directed and produced about the pit bulls rescued from the notorious dogfighting ring of NFL quarterback Michael Vick. So it's an inspirational story of resilience and the relationships between humans and animals. So first I want to go into the making of the film. So Darcy, tell us a little bit about how you came up with the idea of making this film.
I was actually the showrunner of the series Dogtown on National Geographic for about 2.5 years. Back in 2009, we were on the ground filming with best friends when they were making the decision about taking in these dogs that had been rescued from Michael Vick. Both PETA and the Humane Society thought that the dog should be euthanized, but Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, which is based in Kanab, Utah, this really incredible part of the country, had worked with many difficult dogs before, of all different kinds of breeds, including some pit bulls. And they felt really strongly that these dogs could be saved. And that with time and patience and love and care, that these dogs could potentially be adopted out to homes. And so it was a huge undertaking, actually. They're one of the few places in the country that probably had the resources to take on this kind of rescue, because potentially, there is over 50 dogs. And so it was possible in taking on these dogs that they would, if they couldn't rehabilitate them, that they would have to keep them for life. They're this incredible place where they don't believe in euthanizing dogs. And so in taking them in, they were taking on this commitment for life. And so they built this special area for the dogs. And we were there on the ground with our team as the dogs arrived. And so we filmed with them for months, and followed their intake as they arrived on the ground via plane, and the progress that trainers on the ground were making with the dogs. But when Dogtown ended, I can't remember exactly where we were in the process of filming with the dogs. We did a few episodes, including a 90-minute special about the Michael Vick dogs. But I continued to kind of stay in touch I'm very close with the folks at Best Friends, and I continued to kind of follow the dogs and how they were doing. And I knew that nobody was telling the story of where these dogs ended up, and that they were successfully being rehabilitated. And rehabilitated isn't even the right word, because these dogs were really traumatized victims that needed specialized care. I think to use the word rehabilitated suggests that they were violent to start with, which many of them were definitively not. Most of them were definitively not. And that I felt really strongly that it was a story that had to be told, and that there were very few people who understood the dynamics enough and the backstory and what had been filmed, because we used some of that footage to tell the story. And so I just couldn't let it go. and decided, I approached a variety of networks at the time, and Animal Planet was only telling stories about crazy human subjects, and National Geographic said that they would greenlight the episode if I could get an interview with Michael Vick, which I tried really hard to do and could not. He has very smart PR people surrounding him. And so ultimately managed to go ahead and make an independent film. So that's how the film was born.
Mm-hmm. How long did it take to shoot and edit?
It was a while ago now. The film was produced in between 2013 and 2016. So a fair amount of the film is actually using archival that was shot during Dogtown that we were able to license. And of course, Best Friends is really great at filming things on the ground. So we were able to use a lot of footage that already existed from them. And of course, the adoptive families were pretty good about documenting the dogs. And so we shot original footage for probably about a month, which is, it's tricky to tell this kind of story with dogs. And I think it was really helpful to have done Dogtown because I had a much better understanding of how to go about telling stories involving dogs. Dogs can't talk, so of course they have to be represented by humans. And so I had a pretty good understanding of how to tell that story, which might have been tricky otherwise. The edit actually took, gosh, from memory, it probably took about 6 months. Editing feature documentaries, often you have a smaller team than you typically would otherwise, and so that tends to take longer. There's also no cap to how long you can spend on an independent film. You're limited really only by the funds that you have to spend. You can keep raising funds until, for the rest of your life if you would like to do that. And so it just takes extra time because you only have yourself to please, really. And so if you don't have outside limitations being imposed upon you, you can take as much care as you would like, and to do something great, it just takes time and energy. And so 6 months, 6 months is probably a pretty good amount of time for a feature documentary of 90 minutes. But that was really just the beginning, right? Because you finish a film, an independent film, and you think that you're done, but there's a lot more work. You're only like a quarter of the way there. Like there's like a whole lot more work that goes into making a feature documentary and then getting it out into the world.
Yep. I think we'll go into distribution side later. For now, I think to go deeper into the making of the film, what was the biggest challenge you faced?
So many challenges. It's like which one to choose. I thought it would be easy to make an independent film because I'd worked on a lot of challenging subjects throughout the course of my career. How hard could it be? I knew the story really well. Fortunately, I knew the story really well because, as I've since discovered, you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the story is. The creative aspects of making the film were really only about 25% of the job. Like and I was a really experienced producer when I made that film. I think that the hardest part of making an independent film is that you have to learn everything, right? Like you have to learn how to run a company in making the film, overseeing a team of people, keeping everyone's morale up, like keeping everyone on the same train, raising the funds to make the film, all the legal stuff that comes along with making the film. What do you do when you finish it? How do you do a film festival run? Why do you do a film festival run? How do you handle promotion? Why do you do promotion? All this stuff costs money. And then distribution, because if you've made a film and nobody sees the film, I mean, how valuable is it? And we wanted many people to see this film for obvious reasons. I mean, the message of the film is, I think, a pretty unique one and a strong one. And I think that the film has made a really big impact. But without viewers, it wouldn't have mattered. And then, of course, you learn how to do all of this stuff and the landscape completely shifts the next time around. So all that you've learned, like, that's all great, but you have to start again. Like, if you were to make another film, you'd have to start at the beginning. Like, the landscape is completely different now than it was when this film premiered in 2016. So that's really the majority of the task. And it's a formidable amount of work. I mean, it's a huge amount of work. I mean, I loved it. It was the most exciting. Making an independent film is fantastic. I mean, you have independent freedom to do as you would like, versus having a network executive or executives and trying to sort of compromise and trying to fulfill their vision of what your film might be. And with an independent film, you can do exactly as you like and tell the exact message that you would like to tell. But you know, you're also taking on everything that goes like from start to finish with independent film. It's a huge amount of work. It's like never ending, but it's also incredibly rewarding and incredibly worthwhile.
Yep. Cos, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, if the question is, do you prefer independent film or major motion pictures? But it's exactly that. You know, you have much more freedom. I actually have, even on it doesn't matter which level of budget, you have the same experience. Like for example, when I did a lot of films in France, there I could actually do completely new things, like creatively, and then that allows you, and I wonder if you had the same experience. Then, you know, once you went through this, you show people that you're actually capable of, hey, of course you're creative, you can do more than everything, like, you know, filmmaker. I always say, like, how can you do comedy? I write music, of course I can. But you know, you don't get that kind of eligibility in Hollywood, you know. So that allows me then to go back, and then suddenly I get a call for some New York, you know, comedy drama, which I've, you know, after Pirates of the Caribbean, nobody would even call me for. So this is actually helpful for both, I think, levels. If you suffer through an independent film, but you did much more than me. I was just music. You did production, fundraising. You know, that I think that's also what we as a team here want to really learn from you. Actually, is like, I know it's been a few years since you started this, and maybe things have changed, especially since streaming and Netflix and whatnot, and how films are financed. But is like, without the horsepower of unlimited funds at Warner Brothers, how do you actually, you know, get a film financed? And that's very interesting to know.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I mean, there's so much change right now, right? In television, the television landscape is a bit of a disaster right now. Everything is shifting and changing. And of course, you know, with big, I don't work in fiction. I mean, I was a camera assistant in my 20s, but I don't work in fiction film. So of course, that's a whole different animal. But I think what's exciting about independent film is that you literally have the power to create something, anything that you would like, sort of on your own, right? And I think that telling a story is creative. And in the case of the Champions, I had mentioned that I felt that was telling the story, and filmmaking was like 25% of the job, but like using that same creativity as a producer to figure out how to raise the money. Like, how do you inspire people with the story? How do you then raise the funds to tell it? And how do you get it seen, especially in today's landscape where things are so challenging? There's still so much opportunity in independent film because there are no rules, right? Like, there are no limitations. And so if you were to make, you know, a film like The Champions, and of course there's inflation, but like in today's world, a film like The Champions would be like between, I don't know, $750,000 and like $2 million, right? If you could figure out a way to raise that money. Like, it's just a matter of how creative and inventive you are able to be. I just feel like it's that aspect of independent film, I think, is actually pretty exciting. I mean, you have to sort of be steeled for it. I mean, there are plenty of no's. There are always plenty of no's in life, right? Like they say that 99% of people will say no, but it's just the one yes. And you'd be facing plenty of that. But like, I think you face that in all kinds of aspects of life, right? So
I guess in the case of the champions, was budget constraint ever a problem?
I like that question, because when is budget constraint like not a problem? Right? Like you can have like not enough money. There's the problem of like too much money, and which, you know, have worked on series that have had huge budgets, and that carries its own issues. Like, where do you stop? Like, and if you don't have any constraints, like it creates some interesting issues. You know, even when I'm making dinner, like what's the budget for the amount of food, like the amount of food, like the food costs for what I want to spend for making dinner on a Friday night. Like, you know, like the budget is a really important question. It's a huge part of the equation. So like, what is the creative story you want to tell? How much money you're going to spend to do it? And are you going to stay within that amount of money, or are you then going to take the time to raise more money? Because, you know, it's not like there are going to be people lining up to help you to raise the money. So it's all like a time money equation, right? So, you know, in the case of the champions, we fortunately had a very healthy budget to make the film. But what I didn't account for is that when you finish the film, it's an independent film. And so we were very fortunate that we got onto Netflix for 3 years and accomplished our goal, because many, many people saw the film, and we had a great run with TUG. So there are a huge amount of community screenings through TUG, which was great. TUG no longer exists, unfortunately. So the film did incredibly well in that regard, but like, and we were lucky. We had a great PR person, PMKBNC, for the Hamptons Film Festival, which has a division that's about a special segment that is devoted to animal welfare. That's kind of spearheaded by this lovely woman, Zelda Penzel. And the film won an award there, and we were written up in all 5 Hollywood periodicals, which is amazing. And then got into Doc NYC, and I think the combination of those two things allowed us to get pretty good distribution with Netflix. Allowed us to get a sales agent, and then allowed us to get onto Netflix. But, you know, your distributor is not going to pay for promotion, right? If you're lucky enough to get one. So
they say they do.
They say they're supposed to, right? You would think that they would, because it's in their benefit as well. And we had a huge amount of buzz surrounding the film, which I think carried us in many ways. And then you're on Netflix, and then the viewership is so huge. So do you really need to spend the money on marketing? Not sure. But in my case, looking back on it, I would have been really smart as an independent filmmaker to have, I don't even know how much it costs a month to do promotion. I'm going to say $5,000 to $10,000 times 6 months. It would have been great for me to hire a PR agency, because then the voice, it would have been even greater, right? Like, and but that costs money, right? The film festival, God, I didn't anticipate that if the film did well, it was going to cost us quite a bit more money, right? Like the film festival run, which I'd never done before. So I went to all these film festivals, which I don't know that I would do again. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time, but like I hadn't budgeted in a lot of time, my time and money for traveling to these film festivals. In retrospect, I'm not really sure how beneficial it is to spend money on a film festival run beyond a certain number of festivals. But there's a lot more there's just so much there that I learned that I wouldn't have anticipated. So yeah, money, there's never enough, right? But like part of the task is spending it wisely, and you live and learn. But each animal, each film is a different baby, it's a different animal, and so you it's never the same twice. And if it is the same twice, you're probably not growing enough as a filmmaker and challenging yourself enough as a filmmaker. You're resting on your laurels, right? And you're maybe bored and not doing good enough work. So you should always never know what you're doing. Arguably.
Yeah. I think I think we covered a little bit of that, but could you go into a bit more of your experience being hired to produce and direct for television, as opposed to like making your own independent films?
Well, television is, I used to have a fantastic career in television. I've had the good fortune of working on some amazing projects that it's funny, today I was walking with my dog this morning and thinking, I can't remember specifically what it was. I was thinking of like some amazing thing that I did, all the stuff that I take for granted. I've had some incredible experiences in television, like incredible. I used to be a shooter producer, and I think that kind of led me to some interesting opportunities, which I cherish. But television is a completely different animal than independent film. I don't really know what's happening with television right now. It's a bit of there are still people doing interesting films and doing interesting work, but it's I guess it's like plate tectonics. It feels like all of the plates have shifted and there are all these earthquakes everywhere, and that nobody really knows when it's going to settle and how it's going to fix itself. But television, I love getting hired to, it's considered to be like it's a work for hire, right? You're hired to do something. It's a pre-existing a series that's already established, and maybe it's the episode that you have to develop that has, we want to do an episode on bondage and sadomasochism, like go develop that. Like that's, or we want to do a segment on meteorite hunters. Go do that. Like that's really fun, right? And you are hired for a specific rate that's predetermined for a certain number of weeks. I like that typically there's like a bigger, like it's for National Geographic Explorer, or for This Is Life with Lisa Ling. Like, whereas with independent film, you've got to come up with the idea from scratch and then figure out everything connected to it. So it's a completely different animal, right? I love that aspect of television, and I feel like there was a time when there were great things being done on television. And my husband's British, and we watch a lot of British programming, and now there's international programming, which is really exciting. I feel like America's kind of lagging behind as far as nonfiction goes. There's great fiction happening, but the nonfiction television right now is, I would like to see it get better.
I agree with you on that.
we can just leave it there. There's room for improvement, but maybe we'll get there at some point in the future.
Yeah, let's go back to distribution. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. So how did you find Film Hub?
How did I find Film Hub? It's a very good question. We were fortunate, right? We got a 7-year distribution deal with a fairly well-known distributor. So we were one of the lucky ones, right? We got a pretty good deal. We got a 3-year distribution deal with Netflix, which was great for us. And the 7 years ended, and I felt I really wanted more transparency In my relationship with a distributor. I felt, even though the film was now 7 years old at the end of our deal, our distribution deal, I felt like the film still had an audience and people that were interested in it. We have a Facebook page that has something like 25,000 followers, and people are still active on the Facebook group. And I feel like the film made such a big impact. And it was interesting to see at film festivals how people reacted to the film. Like, people really seemed to love it. I think it has a very positive message, and a lot of programming in television today, and you'll see it, right? Like, there's a saying in journalism, if it bleeds, it leads. Like, a lot of storytelling that you'll see across the board. I feel like even the New York Times, which of course I really respect and admire, even is falling into the trap a bit of if it bleeds, it leads in its headlines. I felt like with the film that I wanted to tell a story that was totally positive. So going back to the question of distributor, so I felt like the film still had a life, and that I still, and I, again, like, if the film doesn't have distribution or a place to live, if I've got DVDs at home, if it's not on Netflix anymore, the deal was only 3 years, nobody can see the film. And so what is the value? I wanted a relationship with a distributor that I felt was fair. Filmmakers work so hard to make films. You don't get into filmmaking to make money, but you do it because you love it. I've heard it said that you don't make an independent film, that independent films don't make money. I don't know that that's true. It's hard to know if that's true from where I'm sitting. But making films certainly costs money. One of the really exciting things about making independent films is that you can actually, if you raise, let's say a film costs $1.5 million, you could actually raise that money through donations, right? So it's possible that that money would never have to be repaid. So, but still, $1.5 million is a lot of money. And if you get a certain minimum guarantee from a distributor, that's a fraction of what you've spent, and the reporting is not accurate, it's hard to say. They could be making quite a bit of money back on the film, and you would never know. Even if you've had the good fortune of having a great entertainment lawyer, even if you've taken great care in how the contract is worded, there's often no recourse that you can take if you suspect that the reporting is not being done accurately. And so I forget exactly what led me to Film Hub. I mean, I think I might have landed upon a podcast with you guys probably know this guy's name, Alex. What's his last name? You know who I'm talking about, right? There's this there's a podcaster whose name is Alex.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Alan knows. Ferrari.
Yeah. Ferrari. Yeah,
right.
Alex Ferrari.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
And I think I randomly came upon his podcast. And he mentioned indie rights. He mentioned Film Hub. I talked to people who worked with both. I tried to do as much research as I possibly could online. People were saying great things about both indie rights and Film Hub. And it was hard to decide, what to do, but I definitely knew that I wanted a different relationship with my distributor. And ultimately, of course, I'm sure you guys know all this. Indie rights requires you to sign a contract that you cannot change, right? And I just wasn't comfortable with it. I just wasn't comfortable. Like, I wanted a few very simple changes, and wasn't able to get those changes made. And so I decided to go with Film Hub. There were a few filmmakers who, really great filmmakers who I spoke with, who work with Film Hub, who had great things to say about Film Hub. I looked at a lot of hours of interviews with Klaus and Alan. I did a seminar with Liam, and I decided to give Film Hub a try. I really like the dashboard that you guys have. I like that there's transparency and clear communication. And it seems to me that there's none of that with a distributor, with a traditional distributor. It's like, actually, it feels like you're kept very much in the dark. And so, yes, does that answer the question? I feel like I wandered. I feel like I'm wandering a lot today.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Gus, do you have any comment on that?
No, I appreciate, like, of course, your honesty.
Yeah.
I mean, that Film Hub was born out of experience, of in this, what's going on. That the value, you're a creator, you're a filmmaker, and I've worked we both have worked in the system and outside the system, and it is really that there's never given the right amount of value to the actually creator who starts and holds all the value actually, but doesn't get it in the value chain at the end of the day. That's what made us, Al and I, do this. Like, this is it's ridiculous what you get promised. Everybody gets screwed in our industry, etc. So what we stand for is this. Like, let's do this differently. We can do it from within, but having access to all this systems. You need access to the systems. It's built for. I realized at some point I live in this system. You probably, when you did your TV as well, like you're really inside that broadcast system. But it's a system everybody wants in, but it's not built for everyone. We're keeping them out, and that's where the non-transparency comes from. All this. We still have ways to go, I think, but I think it's a very different approach. That's why I'm very happy to, the more you discuss here and tell us, the more I understand why Keiju picked you to get this, And it's very interesting what you're saying about the struggles and what it means, and the transparency and all these criteria. That's exactly all what's, I think, openly wrong. And I have many stories on my own of movies I worked on, I heard about, and I got in touch with, and that's exactly what's wrong with our industry. And
you talk about that, in the interviews that I listened to you, and you talk about that, and I felt like you understand that and appreciate that. And I feel that, what is that phrase, that rising river lifts all boats. It's like, if we all succeed, isn't that a good thing? And I felt, because you were in the industry as a composer, that and hearing you talk, that there was a real appreciation and understanding there, and that was definitely one of the things that led me to choose working with Film Hub, for sure.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. And back to Keiju. You have great questions, Keiju. I'm usually in the middle, but I'm actually like listening in what you guys talk about.
Cool. So let's go back to some fun topic. Let's go back to the dogs. So I think we see so many amazing moments of each of the dogs in the films, but I'm sure there are plenty that we don't see behind the scene. Let me show you some footage of Cherry. And I think we can talk more about Cherry and her adopter, Paul and Melissa.
I'm a big Cherry fan. I was a big Cherry fan. I was a big Cherry and Handsome Dan fan. Handsome Dan was just such a good name for a pup. It was so good.
Let me show this short footage real quick.
The dogs were given a second chance. All of the dogs, not just Cherry, have taken this opportunity to really show the world that why shouldn't we have the chance? We're no different than any other dog. And Cherry has really become this heartbeat of our family. He's just such an amazing soul. He's just the easiest going guy who just wants to be loved, and he didn't want anything bad to come out of him. It breaks my heart to think that somebody would hurt him because he's so innocent and he's such a great dog. I just can't imagine our family without him. There's so many days where you come home from a long day at work and he's there greeting you with a big smile. You just start thinking to yourself what he went through, and he can put a smile on his face, and it's, you know, it just makes, it makes your bad day just melt away. It's kind of hard to even compare.
Duck. A duck, that's right. Good job. He has had a dramatic impact on our lives.
It's just been an amazing experience with him.
Wow, I feel like I'm still tearing up, like the third time seeing this. How was working with Paul and Melissa?
Gosh, you know, they live really close to where I am at the moment. Great. They're great. They were really active in getting Cherry out and about and meeting people. And they actually flew to Traverse City Film Festival, which was one of the last film festivals in our run, and attended with Cherry. Cherry has been to many, many screenings of the film, and learned to sort of really love it. Like, he would really bask in the attention of people, which was amazing, because when I first met Cherry, which is in the film, Michelle Weaver, one of the trainers at Best Friends, worked with him for like months in order to get him to really even just be able to be comfortable around people in any way. There in the film, you see when he first arrives at Best Friends, he flattens and pancakes and he won't walk at all. Most of the dogs, when they were rescued, were just really shut down and traumatized. Cherry's a good example of that. And with Michelle Weaver's patience, over time, he slowly came out of his shell. And in fact, Cherry really kind of inspired the film in some ways, because Cherry was the inspiration for the film, because years later, I live in New York City, and I went to this event that Best Friends has, this fundraising event called Strut Your Mutt. And I was walking my dog for the event, and I see this black pit bull surrounded by people. And I look up and I'm like, and I recognize Paul and Melissa. And I'm like, oh my God, like, that's Cherry. And he'd come out of his shell enough that he was comfortable to be walking on the streets of New York City, surrounded by people. And I got incredibly emotional at that moment, because I realized that I never would have imagined in a million years that this dog that was so traumatized would come anywhere close. I thought he would live the rest of his life sort of shut down, sort of cowering in the corner of somebody's home if he was lucky enough to get adopted. And this dog literally was able to blossom in this way. And I was like, oh my God, people imagine that people can't change, but here's this dog that completely exceeded anybody's expectations. I have to tell this story. All the people that adopted the dogs that were rescued from Michael Vick's fighting ring, the adopters, are all amazing people. I mean, supporters of Best Friends Animal Society, which I'm a huge fan of to this day. you know, I don't know that not all of them had pit bulls before, but they were all willing to take a chance on these dogs and to prove everyone wrong, right? That not only are pit bulls are individuals, dogs rescued from fighting rings are individuals. And I mean, I live in New York City. I mean, the difference between then and now, you know, 2013, when I started to make the film, and now is huge. Like, there are so many more pit bulls on the streets, people that have responsible dog owners. Their pit bulls are everywhere. So I feel like, you know, this film helped to change perceptions, but the hard work of organizations like Best Friends Animal Society, Bad Rap, who's featured in the film, and others have really made a huge impact on the way that pit bulls and dogs rescued from fighting rings, a huge impact on how they're perceived.
That's amazing. Yeah. I think, to what degree do you think the perception of just pit bulls in general changed since the making of the film?
I think the perception over the years has changed dramatically. I mean, there's always kind of a dog of the day that I feel like is demonized for one reason or another, maybe because they've been featured in a film as being like a bad dog, becomes like the bad breed of the day. But I think that, you know, I spent months in small enclosed area at Best Friends Animal Sanctuary with some of these dogs that have been rescued from Michael Vick's fighting ring, right? Super close to like Lucas, who was a fighting champion, who had scars all over his face and was super friendly with people, right? Super friendly. And then I was in a dog run in New York City, in Washington Square Park, and it was this little spaniel that like gave me its paw once, and then gave me its paw again, and then bit me in the face, you know? So it's like, you know, it's every dog's an individual. But I feel like films like The Champions really have the power to change the world. You know, like, I feel like I can, I'll always be really proud of the impact that a film like The Champions has made on pit bulls, on the perception of pit bulls and dogs rescued from fighting rings. But I think that's the amazing thing about independent film in general, is that you can make a film and it can completely change the world. Like, I think Film Hub has Vessel, the film about abortion.
Yes.
And these films are really important, right? And they aren't often films that networks are going to fund. And so you really can change the world through, and it's not just like a hokey thing to say, like, you can really change the way that people perceive things through the power of a film.
Of course. Yeah. That's why we're doing this, is we believe in the power of film. But I think also, but then in the age of YouTube and TikTok, do you think that power is still as strong?
You know, it's an interesting question to ask. It's so interesting that technology changes the way that people think and feel, and throughout the course of history, right? Like, photography changed the way that people think and feel, and then the advent of film changed the way that people think and feel. Internet is like just another technology that changes the way that people interact with the world and learn and understand things around them. It's undoubtedly had an impact on the film industry. I mean, we're seeing it right now, right? But you know, how often do people read a book versus look on NewYorkTimes.com and like look around at articles? But I mean, there's definitely a place for independent film, right? And hopefully it will continue to have a place. Things are definitely changing, and I'm sure that they'll continue to change, but there's nothing like a 90-minute documentary on a topic like the, you know, The Champions, or any other number of things that you can see independent films on. There's nothing like it. So hopefully it will continue to have a home, and I'm sure people will continue to innovate the ways that stories are told through shorter pieces. People undoubtedly have shorter attention spans from a general point of view, but maybe they'll start going back to watching, you know, maybe things will change, continue to evolve.
So Okay, yeah, my last question, could you talk more about your future projects?
Well, the state of the industry is in a bit of turmoil right now, and it's been a difficult 3 years, I think, for everybody. There are lots of challenges on the landscape. I'm currently doing, very fortunate to be working in the corporate space. I wish that I had a trust fund. I would be spending it really wonderfully right now, doing independent filmmaking. I am thinking about doing some independent films. My dad is a war veteran, went to Vietnam and has been sober for 16 years. But I grew up with him while he was drinking and suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. I'm considering, and so I've done some interviewing with my parents and would like to do a short film of them. And if I do a short film, I feel like Film Hub might be a great place to distribute it. There are a few other things that I'm developing. It's definitely a long, hard road right now to pitch things to television. There are a few other ideas I have for feature films, and it may be that there's a lot of opportunity there right now because more traditional ways of making programs are so challenging at the moment on television. So as much as I loved the process of making an independent film, it is so hard. It is so hard. And so I've heard that filmmakers don't always make a second feature. And when I first heard that, I sort of laughed at it. I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna be one of those people. I'll make another one really soon. But after the whole process was over, I was like, okay, now I get it. But I feel like I am kind of ready. It's been a while and I feel like I'm kind of ready to get back in the saddle again. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the next project's going to be. It's quite difficult because you need to love it enough that you're going to wake up with it for a really long time. And if you're not incredibly passionate about it, you'll have a very hard time making it to the finish line.
That's awesome. We're really looking forward to what you do next.
Thank you.
Cool. I think we have a little bit of time to open it up for the team. So if anyone has any question, please introduce yourself briefly and ask your question.
Hi, I don't really have a question, more of like an observation. I'm Emmy. I'm a licensing manager here at Film Hub. I live in Denver. I've lived in Colorado my whole life, so I'm very, very much aware of the pit bull ban that's gone on for the last 30 years. But in the last 2 years, that ban went away. While Denver is still very much, yes, Denver.
That's great. Denver was a big one. Like they were very, very adamant about that stuff.
Yes. And I can say, I mean, they still have breed bans here, like not bans, restrictions. So if you have a pit bull, you have to it has to go through like an extensive, they have to be seen by somebody in Denver, at like the Denver Humane Society to see if they can actually live here in Denver. So they have to have like actual, like basically go through testing. But I will say in the last 2 years, I've lived in Denver for the last 8 years. The rise of just seeing pit bulls walking around has elevated, which, makes me happy because I got to be part of, voting for this ban to be lifted.
That's great.
Yeah. So, and I've never ever met a pit bull that was not the friendliest thing on the planet. So, I just want to say, like, this film was absolutely beautiful. I cried multiple times. I think everybody did, just to show the love that these dogs deserve. And, these dogs deserve that second chance. And you showed that. Like, nobody showed that when this happened. It was like, where did these dogs go? Like, we didn't see that in the media. So I just want to say thank you for doing this and like being a part of like rescuing these dogs.
Thank you. That's so nice. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the film is also, you know, it's a reflection. Best Friends Animal Society is amazing in that they are really good at staying positive, right? It's very difficult, the work that they do. And there's so much darkness and negativity in the world, but they're amazing to get to know because there's a lot of power in telling the positive side of a story, right? Like, and it's not often done. It's not done enough. And it also just reminds me that part of the reason I wanted to tell this story was at the time I had a rescue from my time working on Dogtown. It was a Chihuahua mix from LA where Chihuahuas are often euthanized. There's a lot of Chihuahua type mixes in LA. And just that unconditional love that you feel, the bond that you have with your dog, there's like nothing like it, right? Like they're incredible creatures. And I felt like this film was an expression of that relationship that people have with animals. But thank you, I really appreciate that. And yeah, Denver was definitely something that I gave a lot of thought to during the course of making the film, and breed bans. Actually, Best Friend said that now, back when we made the film, 14 states considered dogs rescued from fighting busts to be dangerous. Or contraband that ended up, you know, they ended up being kind of segregated for months during trials and court type stuff that was happening. And now there's only 7 that consider them to be dangerous or contraband. And they're working on that legislation, and also they continue to work on breed discriminatory legislation and advocating against it, like certain homeowner policies don't allow certain breeds. So yeah.
Awesome. So I think on that note, we'll end our Q&A session here. Thank you, Darcy, for an amazing conversation. Thank you, Kaz.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. And thank you so much for Film Hub. I'm so excited that you exist, and really feel fortunate to have the film up on Film Hub, and looking forward to seeing how things unfold. And I just feel grateful that there's a place that the film, a platform that's helping the film to be seen by more people, and making a difference in how people perceive pit bulls and dogs rescued from fighting situations. So thank you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darcy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.